We're going with this. You've heard some really good talk about leadership and vision and values and how to express those values in terms of your strategy and all those things. So hi, come on in. We were just sharing our most embarrassing moment.
Oh, well,
and
let me go back.
and then of course all these other topics. Today, this particular session is going to be just on how do we handle the financial side of life so that it doesn't get in the way of what God's called us to do. We've talked a lot today about having a vision and having a purpose and having a higher aim of what we do and being clear about that. But I've seen it over and over be a tragic story when somebody's clearly gifted and called to do something, but for financial situations in their life, they're not able to fulfill that or at least extend it to the way that they would want to or feel called to. Let me just illustrate that out a little bit further. The average NBA player plays 4 to 5 years in their career professionally. That's it. Either you just get old or your knees give out. But the good news is you make between $30 and $40 million. Average player. Okay, some make more, some make less. Average NBA player, 4 to 5 years, $30 to $40 million. 2/3 of them will be broke in 5 years after they leave the NBA. So if you're coming into this conversation thinking, well, if I could just make a little more money, if I could just get my income. Now listen, I'm all for let's get income up. But let's not kid ourselves and think that this is simply about trying to get the income up. If we're not stewarding and managing and applying intentionality and discipline to what we already have in our hands, it's not likely much more is going to come into our hands, and it certainly is going to stay in our hands. And so this is going to be, in some ways, you're going to go like, Rick, duh, like really? We had to come have a talk, had to come all, here, and Jeff had to go through all this work to put on this big old event just so you could tell me these very basic, fundamental things. Yes. But because it's not a matter of do we know them, but are we practicing them well? And just like anything else, how many times, do we just need a reminder, right? So some of this today will be a reminder. Also, some of us lead or you have influence on the next generation. And so I'm going to give you some resources, and I'm going to give you some tips and ways to have these conversations in a very succinct way, because if you're responsible for a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old who's coming into the world, they need to know and practice these things, and the earlier they do in life, the better it will go for them. This is one of those things that has real-life consequences, especially how you behave in your 20s. It's kind of like how you take care of your teeth. If you do a really good job in your 20s, your 50-year-old self is grateful. If you do a really bad job, in early adulthood, then it tends to cause a lot of struggle later on. So we have a little activity, because I'm all about activities, that will help illustrate what we're going to talk about today. So I know it's after lunch and all that blood's down here digesting all that fabulous barbecue that we had, but I need 3 volunteers, and the most spiritual people, the most really wonderful, amazing people always volunteer. And so I need 3, and there's 2 people in the room. I guess you could do it if you wanted to, but all right, she won't do it. But so I need 3 out of the 4 of you. In fact, there's no way, I'm not going to leave somebody out. We're going to have all 4 of you, and Jeff, you can play too, because you're in the room. So everybody's going to play except Bob and Tina, because they've done this. All right, so come over here, Jeff. I want you to play too. So everybody gets a balloon. Everybody gets a balloon. Everybody gets a balloon. I'm trying not to touch the part that you used to blow up, so you can have red or blue, and you'll get red.
My favorite.
There you go, favorite color. All right, so here's what I want you to do. Let me get one so I can practice. Do not hit people with your balloon, Jeff. All right.
You need let people know things you
All right. You do the whole stretchy out thing, right? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to put air in the balloon, and you can put a little bit, you can put a whole lot. Try not to pop the balloon, but don't tie it off, just pinch it off, okay? So blow the balloon up with as much air as you want, okay? Now, what I'd like for you to do, this is the part where you're going to get to stand up and do something. So leave your things there, stand up, and everybody go stand next to Jeff in the back by the counter.
Do we have to?
Yeah, you do. This is the part where you have to participate. It's mandatory.
Well, I meant the Jeff part.
Oh yeah, you can down the line. All right, now one at a time, and your name is Vicky. So kind of standing where Vicky is, but not coming much closer. I'd like you to release your balloon, and I'd like you to not just hit the target, but hit the yellow part of the target. And by the way, we're going to do 2 rounds of this. So after you do the first round, I'm going to give you your balloon back, and you're going to get to do it again. So try it. You can just release your balloon, and the goal is to let the air out of the balloon, propel the balloon, and hit this target right here, okay?
Sure.
All right. All right, let's get that.
You gotta stand up
All right,
4 feet.
you're next.
That's
That went the opposite direction. All right. Okay. Britt. Hey, Britt got closest so far. Right? It is Britt, right? Yeah, okay. Good. Gail? All right, no head starts. No head starts. You got to start back there by the table. Hey, also, at least, hey, better than Jeff, okay?
well, that's what
Better than
counts.
Jeff. All right, and then, whoa, hey, that was close. That ended up way over here. All right, now, I think you're, here you go. I think you're trying, but I don't think you're trying hard enough, okay? I mean, I think you're kind of into it, but you're kind of, Rick, you're making us do this thing after lunch. So I'm going to ante it up a little bit, okay? The first one that hits the target, the yellow part, gets a $10 Starbucks card.
Yeah,
This
but
is,
Jeff and I only go to Dunkin' Donuts.
you can, this is like currency. You can trade this on the open market. Put this on Craigslist, take the $10, go to Dunkin', and you'll be great. All right, let's go. All right, so really try this time. Hey, I don't even know if I can get that. We may not find that for a while. Okay. All right. He's got a little something going on. All right.
There you go, Jeffrey. Whoa, look at him.
All right, Brett. Counting on you, man.
Oh, he's blowing it way.
Bring it. That ended up. That's called a boomerang. All right.
Goodness, I don't know if that stretch it helped them or not. Whoa, we're getting.
Whoa. Hey. All right. Is it Thelma?
Myrna.
Myrna. I couldn't read. You're covering up there a little bit. Okay, Myrna. All right. Myrna got the closest because she hit me, so I'm going to give her the Starbucks card because I'm a little bit afraid of her now. All right. All right. Thank you. You can have a seat, and we're going
It's
to.
like America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yep.
We get to keep the balloon?
You absolutely can keep the balloons, and at any time you can blow it up and throw it at Jeff. All right. So, what did we learn? It's fun to start things with a little bit of activity in the afternoon, okay, to get the blood going. All right, let's talk about what we have. First of all, how did we do? If the goal was to hit the yellow part of the target, how did we do? Yay or nay? Terrible, right? In terms of results, no good, no bueno, all right? So let's talk about from a positive. As a leader, you always want to start with a positive. What did you have going for you? What was helpful in the process? Did you have a tool? You had a balloon. All right, we'll come back to that. But you had a tool. Did you have a goal? Did you have a clear goal? Could not have been more. I mean, literally a target. Okay, it could not be more abundantly clear. Did you have an encouraging, supportive environment? Yeah, I mean, sometimes. Mostly, right? You know, I was encouraging you and trying to keep you motivated, and I gave you a little bit of extra motivation with the Starbucks card, you know, just to really have you lean into it. So here's what I'm trying to say, and we're going to come back to what got in the way in a second. You can have a clear goal. You can have a reasonable tool. You can have hard effort and even a lot of inspiration and encouragement and still get lousy results. All right? So let's talk about those lousy results. What got in the way of success? The balloon is a terrible tool the way we were using it, right? This idea of, so that doesn't work. And yet we just kept trying over and over. And y'all, right? You never said, Rick, no, what if we changed it? We did it this way. Or what if I gave you a bow and arrow? Would that have been a better tool? Yeah, that would have been a better tool. A tennis ball would have been much better. Or even if we had used the balloons, but I allowed you to tie up the balloons and then toss them, and then we made course corrections along the way, right? And so, you know, once that balloon leaves your hand, do you have any ability to alter the course of that balloon? Well, here's the good news. When it comes to our financial world, our financial life, every day is a new day to make course corrections. So you may be walking in here today and go, I got like 95% of this right. It's going well. Great. Keep doing what you're doing, and maybe we'll just make a couple tweaks. Your balloon, you may have walked in here, and your financial balloon's in the other room, okay? It's totally in the right direction. Good news, we can make course corrections. And so life is kind of won and lost in the execution. You got to have the vision, you got to have the values, but at some point, all good ideas and the best intentions come down to getting up and getting things done. And regardless of your starting point, and starting points matter, I get it, and starting points are not the same, okay, totally get it. But regardless of starting point, these are all principles and skills and habits and rhythms that we can incorporate into our lives that'll bring us more into fulfilling the role that is our God-given journey, okay? So we're starting this conversation with, we believe God has given to us a vision and a life purpose, and that finances are simply a tool. They are not the goal. We're going to emphasize that. The money is not the goal. Living a purposeful life that is fulfilling the call that you have on your life is the goal. Money is a tool. And let me go ahead and give you one punchline right here. And again, I'll give you the handouts later. Money is a terrible master, but it's a great servant. It's a terrible employer, but it's your best employee. Here's the thing. If I make money my God, little g God, if I make it my employer, my master, it'll wreck my life. Of course, we know Scripture says that the love of money just leads to all kind of evil in our lives. We don't want to do that. But you know what? Everywhere I tell a dollar to go, it goes. Now, sometimes I forget to tell it, and it goes anyhow. Right? Am I the only one? Yeah. Right, like those balloons chasing off. But money always does what I tell it to do. Now, again, I got to be wise in what I tell it to do, but it makes a great servant. And so the goal of all of this conversation is to help have us have really good conversations about how to purposefully utilize resources as a way of not getting in the way or prohibiting us from fulfilling what God's called us to do, but actually living it out and actually propelling us and thriving in that and being generous to others. So that's the goal of what we're trying to do. Now, a little bit about me, because you need to know about me. That's our gang. We got together and made this Christmas card for you. No, we did this at Christmas time. That was at our church. That's my wife there in the gold. Oops, sorry, I got a little weird thing going on there. I'll get rid of that in a second. My wife, Camille, is there in the kind of the gold sweater. We've been married 30 years this year, so she deserves like, an award or something. Those are our two daughters, and they say where your treasure is, there your heart is. Also, a lot of our treasures there, and so a lot of our heart is as well. That's Catherine next to me. She's 22. And Reagan, the one all the way over there who's a little bit got some of her dad's personality, she's coming down here to UCF. Going to be down the road, so you're probably going to be seeing more of me, because again, where your treasure is, there your heart is. A lot of my treasure is going to UCF, therefore you're going to see a lot more of me. So that was Christmas time at our church, and just a real little bit about me. I have a financial background, education in finance. Spent about 10 years in the banking industry here in Central Florida, and then about 1998. Took a right turn, not a wrong turn, but a right turn. The Lord called us to kind of use those skills in the church world. Did that in pastoral roles, consultative roles, worked with Bob, helping, coming alongside church in kind of para-church world. And now the Lord has kind of taken me full circle and blended the financial side and the ministry side and put me in a financial ministry. And so I work primarily with churches, but we work on the financial side and consult with churches in the area of charitable giving and loans and just helping them financially thrive so, again, they can do all that God's called them to do. So that's kind of a little bit about me and what I get to do. So I'll get rid of that thing in a second. Whoop, that's going to be a problem, isn't it? So Christmas is about generosity, isn't it? It's about giving. How many times have you heard that? That it's, we want to be able to be givers. But here's the thing. If we're not careful, money can get in the way of that. In fact, there are some things I want to talk about that are actually generosity killers. So let's talk about those. First one is this. If I'm living my life, and this is, I think, is kind of the American dilemma. I think other parts of the world deal with this, but not nearly as much as we do. Our culture in America says, get all you can all you get, and sit on your can. Okay? That's the culture's approach to money. Get all you can all you get, and then sit on your can. Protect it, right? That's not, a wise way to live when it comes to money. And so don't be kind of putting your standard on what's going on down the street. There was this commercial, I thought about getting the clip and showing it, but about 10 years ago, and this guy's riding lawnmower, you may remember it, and he's like, you may wonder, how does this guy drive a brand new car and a wonderful house, and I have this beautiful lawn and this great lawnmower, and I have all these things. You may be wondering how I do it. And he's like, I'm up to my eyeballs. That's because we're trying to keep up with somebody down the street. That's just a fruitless aim. And so don't play that game. I'm not going to be able to get rid of that thing in my. Debt is a killer. Debt is sometimes needed, but generally to be avoided. So sometimes you need debt to accomplish something, and it can be a bridge, but you'll never borrow your way into prosperity. You'll never borrow your way to financial goals and fulfillment. So it can be a tool or a strategy sometimes, but it can't be the ultimate. I know, and in the corporate world, we're seeing a lot of this play out as companies are taking on a lot more debt and trying to buy other companies and that sort of thing. So you can't borrow your way into prosperity. Disorganization, just sloppiness, just kind of. I know so many people, and I've just worked with people professionally over the years. Doctors, attorneys. I had an attorney say this to me one time. I just thought about this. He was a trial attorney. Like, if you murder somebody in Jacksonville, Florida, you want this guy to defend you, okay? Don't do that. Don't test that theory. But if you do, this is the guy you want. And this is about over 20 years ago. And so I was his banker. And he was talking about some personal investments with me, and I was explaining him the difference between Class A shares and Class B shares and all this. He's just glossing. He's an attorney, so he's a real detail-oriented guy, but he's a trial attorney, okay? He's not the kind of attorney that does details. And he just kind of looked at me, and he kind of stopped me. He said, hey, Rick, just know this. If you cheat me, I will sue you. And my point is, sometimes even really, really brilliant people they don't want to deal with this side of their life. And I think somewhat to their peril, okay? Because you don't have to be a financial whiz, but you do need to know the basics about finances and to do them well. And it's just it doesn't end well if you just kind of outsource that to others. And so you got to have some level of connection to all of that. And then this is kind of a personal bias of mine. You feel free to disagree with this, but you, of course, would be wrong. But I see this a lot in just talking, not a lot, but from time to time, I see this with couples where there's like his money, and I'm talking about a married couple that's in a life commitment relationship, and you've got her money, and you've got his money, and who knows about our money, and yet these bills come in, and things have to be taken care of, and it is a very, at a minimum, it's a very inefficient way to run a family household. And so it's like trying to keep two sets of books. And it just is a really hard way. And it will slow you down in getting the things done if you're not on the same page. That doesn't just apply to money, by the way. I mean, your lives need to be kind of connected together. That's just an aside. So let's talk about some financial wisdom and some practical things. First thing I would say is this: be a planner. Be a planner. Now you may say, I don't, Rick, I'm more of a off the cuff kind of person. Okay, do that with certain things in your life, but don't do it with this. You can be spontaneous with date night, okay? But don't be spontaneous with your money. Have a plan. Here's why. So have you heard of Dave Ramsey? His organization, a person who was in his organization about 4 or 5 years ago, so it's pretty recent, a little bit before COVID, did a study, a national study on all of the people in North America who had a net worth of $1 million or more. Okay, so you got to have some measure of, okay, here's people who somehow have accumulated wealth. And they looked at what were the most common vocations of people who were, by that definition, a millionaire. Okay, so how many of them are this, and how many of them do this for a living? How many of them do this? What do you think the top 3 vocations were of all of the people, if you ranked them? what would be some of the top vocations you do? Well, this would be where the most millionaires are. What would you think it would be?
I think it would be people who had a trade and did their own business, started their own business.
Yes, and while it is very lucrative to do that, the numbers just aren't that big. In terms of small business owners who are sole proprietors.
And are minorities.
Yeah. It's so yeah. I mean that can be a very lucrative thing to do, but the numbers just don't get to the top of the list in terms of the sheer numbers of them. What else? There's no bad answers. I mean, there's just a lot of.
Sure.
Well,
Well, I mean, the thing we think of is lawyers and doctors.
yes.
Indian chiefs and, that
Yes,
kind of thing.
and certainly that is certainly a high income profession to be in. But the numbers, when you actually look at them, if you just put them in buckets according to their vocations, here are the top three: accountants, teachers, and engineers.
Teachers.
I know, right? Hard research. Okay, you can go back and look at it. It's called The Millionaire Next Door. Is the book if you want to check it out. So what do all three of these, the answers on the board, what do all three of these have in common? Accountants, engineers, and teachers.
They all had to have further schooling, college.
There is, yep. That's certainly a factor. I think there's kind of vocational education requirements in all three of them. Yeah. Look, go up to the top bullet. They're planners. An engineer does what? Gives you a set of plans to build something. A teacher builds a curriculum. What is curriculum? It's a pathway to learning. It's a plan. It's a teaching plan, right? We talk about teaching plans. An accountant gives you a tax plan or a wealth plan or that sort of thing. They talk about what's happened in the past, but then how to prepare for the future. They're planners. They're very detail-oriented planners.
I don't see pastors up there.
No, and you won't. They're treasures in heaven. So lots of treasure, different location.
Keep writing.
You're building up a lot there, Jeff. Keep it up, brother. So they're planners. Isn't that astounding, though? And of course, teachers are like accountants and engineers. You're not big surprises there. Those are typically high-paying professions. But teachers, here's why. There's so many of them. Okay, and among that big pool of people, they're good planners. And guess what? This is where, and there's places in the Bible where it talks about consider the ant, consider the creatures on earth who just do little things each day that build up to really big things over a lifetime. And that's what teachers are. So they're not making most of them aren't making six-figure salaries, that sort of thing. But here's the thing: six-figure salaries doesn't lead to wealth. We already established that with the NBA players. It's practicing habitual discipline in the area of finances. So we're going to talk about that. They're planners. So here's the first thing. So Rick, where do we start? These are not necessarily in order, and I'll give you some logic to order in a little bit. But save wisely. And here's what that means. Do it methodically. Let me just put some of these up here. A little over half of the people in North America spend more than they make. Now, it is impossible mathematically to be a saver if your outgo is more than your income. You just simply, you don't just have other problems, you have a math problem. And so, here's my friend again, he won't go away. Here's the thing, most North Americans, and this statistic is held up, I know, for at least 10 years, do not have at least $400 in savings. So if something goes out in their house or they have a car repair or something comes up, which they always come up, right? Those things come up, they're having to put that on credit, they're having to do other things to be able to pay for it. They don't have that, okay? And again, that's a real issue, but we're going to talk about some things you can do to overcome that. So here's first thing I would say. If you're employed with an employer that has a 401k, or if you're in the nonprofit world, a 403b, they many times are offering you to participate in a company offered or sponsored retirement plan. Some of them, most of them I would say, offer some sort of matching or contribution. So the first thing I always say to people is, are you maxing out your employer's matching contribution? You may or may not be surprised how many people I talk to that says, well, they'll match up to 5%, but I can only put 2% in. You're literally leaving money on the table. Literally, there's matching money there that they're willing. So it's not that that's for everybody, but it's one of those things you have to check that. And so the first thing I would say is check with your employer, ask more specifically about your benefits and if they have matching 401k. So take advantage of that. A couple other things. Do it regularly. The best, and I'm going to give you some examples of this in a second, but the best way to approach savings is blindly. It just happens, almost pre-tax, or it's happening coming out of your paycheck, whether it's pre-tax or post-tax. So, you can set it aside in a 401k or an IRA or something like that, or even if it's after taxes are taken out and you're putting it into a Roth or a Roth IRA or a savings account or something like that. Do it pre-tax, post-tax, but do it regularly. And then compound interest is a law of the universe. Okay, it's one of those things that the good Lord has put into the fabric of the universe, just like gravity and other things, and it can work for you or it can work against you, and you want to get it working for you. I'm going to get this quote a little bit off, but Warren Buffett says, if you have in life, you have to learn how to make money work for you while you sleep, or you'll work for the entirety of your life. You'll always be working. You have to somehow save money so that you've invested it and it's working for you. Otherwise, you'll never get to a point where you're not working to put food on the table. So let's talk about long haul investing. I found this example. Of course, what's the best day to invest? Yesterday. Okay. the second best day. Yeah, that was real tricky. Like, 1987 or something. Yesterday, I wasn't that philosophical. Let's say, how many of you have teenagers in your life, or people who are, kind of young adults, right? Yes. Or, you will have grandkids who will be young adults in the next decade or so. So, if they get a summer job, and they invest, and I know this is a lot of money for a 16 or 17-year-old, but they were to invest $2,000. So they work all year, or during the summer or whatever, and somehow they don't spend it all on apps in their on their phones or other in-game purchases or whatever. But they, and I just say this from experience, but they actually save $2,000, and they do that when they're 16, 17, and 18. And then they never save a dime for the rest of their life, but they put that money in an index fund, like an S&P 500. This is kind of following the stock market. That's all it's doing, the large company stocks, okay? And they did that until they're 65. So they put 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, and I don't recommend this, but they never invested anything else. And then they just forgot about it, went and lived their life. This is what would happen. Real high-tech graph here. I took a picture of the book. And this is, by the way, this is in this book called The Money Challenge by Art Rayner. It's a great book, and as you can see, that's kind of my kind of a book right there. It's really helpful, practical financial information. And I know that's small font, but basically that bottom line on there is $591,000, $583. If it just stuck it in, and by the way, if you see the top line or two, they lost a little money. So this is going to have years where the stock market goes down and they're going to back up. But over time, the compounding effect, so the earnings are earning earnings. And that compounding effect kicks in, and $591,000 later. That's crazy, isn't it? Now, we want them to save all the rest of their lives, too. So, this is why grandparents buy savings bonds, right? Because, now this is in the stock market, so it did a little bit better than savings bonds. But
Christmas clubs?
I do, absolutely.
We didn't make much money then. We put $5 in.
Yeah,
and
right.
Then at the end, beginning of December, you'd have all this Christmas money.
Yeah. But this has generated some really interesting conversations with our 18-year-old. Hey, just put this money, because your 50-year-old self, your 60-year-old self will be really glad that you did. So get that working for you, not against you. When you take out a loan, it's working against you, because now all that interest is taking money, wealth away from you. All right, I've got to get rid of this. This is totally bothering me now. I'm just going to get rid of this. So I want to give you 8 money milestones. These are again, from the book, but I think they're really helpful. It's not like a formula, but it's a good roadmap. And so there's not just one way to do this. And again, I'll give you the slides. But they say, okay, where do I start? First thing that Art says in the book, and I totally agree with, 8 milestones. First thing is not look at your spending. First thing isn't talk about saving. The first thing is start giving. Why is that? Because if you don't detach your heart from hoarding money, none of the rest of it will work. We have to learn how to approach money with an open hand, a generous hand. And whether you're giving just a little bit or you need to give more, and of course, I always recommend start with your church. That's the best way to give, all right? You start with the church. But just be generous. Be generous with other people. Be generous with organizations. Be generous with causes. When you have an opportunity to give, we say, I don't have that much. Well, it's not really about the amount. It's about your relationship and how you view financial resources. And the more you can look at it, remember I said it makes a really terrible master, but it makes a really great servant. So start with giving. Just be a giver. It'll open up your heart and your life, and you'll deal with money with a lot more faith than fear. And that's really what you want. Secondly, save $1,500 for minor emergencies. Now, that may seem like a little amount of money to you. It may seem like a really large amount of money to you. But can I say, I wrote this down somewhere. I looked it up just to make sure my math was right. There's kind of what's called the 52-week challenge. And I don't know if you've heard of this before. It's a pretty common thing among financial advisors and things. But if you save for 52 weeks in a year, you saved $1 week 1. Second week, $2. Third week, $3. Now we're getting up to a Starbucks cup, you know. Fourth week, $4. Fifth week, $5. Okay, and you did that all the way up to $52 that you saved on the final week. You would have $1,378. And with a little bit of interest help or other investment, because you're investing that money along the way, you'd probably be up pretty close to $1,500. So that may, I don't know if that encourages you or not, but it's so realistic. It's so practical, doable. And sometimes we got to take big lofty things and just break it down to a simple thing. Hey, can you save $1 next week? Can you save $2 the next week? Can you say, no, obviously the principle is you can save more than $1. But you can get to $1,500 in a very reasonable amount of time. We already talked about maxing out your retirement accounts and taking advantage of that. You definitely want to look into that. And then start knocking off debt, whether that's credit card debt, car debt. Don't worry about student loans. Joe Biden's going to take care of that. But just kidding. There's some big story today about he's forgiven all this debt. I don't know. He's got that on his sights on all that. But you want to try to eliminate that non-mortgage debt as quick as possible. Not necessarily your house, we'll get to that, but your credit card, because those usually have the high rates of interest, and they just swallow up your earnings and interest charges. So again, you want to get rid of that as quick as possible. And then now you're at a point now where you say, okay, well, what's my budget? And we'll get to budget in a minute. But when you look at a budget, you say, well, we're spending X amount of dollars a month. Can you get to a point where you have set aside at least 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency account? That's a really good place to be, okay? And again, most Americans are not there, but that's a really good place to be if you can get there. And then, another goal, and again, we see how these build. They seem a little bit more daunting, a little bit more challenging as we go. 15% towards retirement. Okay, that's a kind of a tough one, because it means you're living off of 85% is everything you're giving away and living off of. Okay, so putting 15% towards retirement is a challenge, but if you can get there, that's a really good milestone. And then the other big things, if you've got kids that you're going to be paying college for, and then of course retirement, you want to make sure you've saved for that, and then get your mortgage paid off and or pay off your mortgage. And then once you've established how much you need to live off of, why hang on to it? You've got your retirement set, you've got the emergency funds there. I am not at this point, so I don't want to kind of overstate this, but I so admire people. Do y'all know what a tithe is? So in general in church talk, we talk about 10% of your income going towards, directly right, out of your hands into the to the church and to the work of the Lord. I know people, and in my job working with sometimes fairly wealthy people who are very generous, and sometimes not so wealthy people who are very generous. I've actually encountered several times people who are reverse tithers, meaning they live off of 10% and they give away the 90. I'm not there, but I'd love to be there. I'd love to be there. Because again, I've never met a generous person who wasn't cheerful. I've never met, I've met, I've met some people who had a lot of money and were happy, and I've met a lot of money people who weren't very happy. But people who are generous almost always tend to be cheerful people. So live generously, whatever that means. I was just giving you that as kind of a wow, wouldn't that be a great goal? But whatever generosity looks like, wouldn't it be great to be more generous next year than this year? Don't you just know, and just in your walk of maturing in life and your spirituality and just all that you think that you're trying to become, you just want to be more generous and leave this world a little bit better than you found it. So great milestones. Again, you might say, well, I'd do this one before that one, or I'd change this one. That's fine. But it's good to have some mile markers to know where you are at on the journey. Any feedback or thoughts on that? It kind of gives you a roadmap to say, well, here I'm kind of right here, and so maybe the next thing we need to be focusing on is this. So, all right, hopefully that's helpful. All right, this is my commercial for what I do in my day job. So I want to talk just a little bit. We've been talking mainly about our cash and our savings and our income and how we manage that. I want to zoom out a little bit because here's the reality. Let me get a pen. I'll look real smart if I write this down. In a typical person's net worth, and again, that's just your assets minus your liabilities, about 10%, this is on average, you might say, well, Mom, I'm a little different, usually is in cash and income. So your paycheck and what you have in a savings account, okay? 90% is non-cash. Now, what do you mean by that, Rick? So retirement accounts, any stocks or other types of investments that you have, bonds, annuities, real estate, your home, a second home, a piece of property that you may have in your family, things of that nature. The typical person has 90% of their wealth in non-cash. So when we talk about generosity and we talk about stewardship, it's not real smart to only talk about the 10%. How do we approach generosity and stewardship on the whole? Because if you approach this from a faith perspective, you believe that everything that comes into your hands comes from where? Yeah. So if we believe that, and He's the owner of it, and we're stewards of it, how we steward this is just as important as how we steward this. And so and yet, the number is so consistent. It never moves from research year to research year. 60% North Americans have no will, no estate plan, no documents that determine that once I leave planet Earth and graduate to heaven, that there's a plan in place, not only for all of it, but particularly for this. And so one of the things that we do, and I'm not really doing a commercial, I'm just saying, hey, you need to have a plan. But this is something that we do, particularly for churches and individuals. As we come in and try to address this issue of only 60% having a will, and help either get a will document. Now, a will doesn't solve everything, but if you die without a will, you die what's called intestate. And that means you are absolutely going to go through probate, and you're going to have your estate determined by a judge in a very public way, and they're going to determine how much everybody gets. That's a very inefficient, and by the way, attorneys make money every time there's a document, okay? So just keep in mind. So it's one of those things you pay now or pay later. And when you go ahead and have a plan in place now, it would not only show love, but generosity and stewardship. Why do I say it shows love by having an estate plan? Pastor doesn't get to answer this one because I know you know the answer.
Oh, it saves us.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
On the family.
Oh.
The kids.
Yes.
And the brothers and sisters fighting and.
Yeah.
Well, Grandma said I could have this, but no.
Right. Exactly. Even in a healthy family situation, it brings a sense of tension and perhaps conflict. And then you start having to have the conversations Bob was just talking to us about. You have to have those, hard conversations with people. But if everything's planned out and everything is known, you can't eliminate the possibility for conflict. People can always find something to have conflict about, but you at least will make your wishes known and legally enforceable, okay, than not having a plan. Not to get too far in the weeds, but a will is helpful because it at least gives a document that determines all of that. A will does not help you avoid probate. It just helps you get your wishes known. If you want to avoid probate, there's another mechanism that is completely legal. This is where the government gives us legal ways to do this. It's called a revocable living trust, and you just place all of your, it's like a bucket. It's a legal entity that you create. And so it would be, in my case, the Wheeler Family Trust. We would put all the assets that we own, cash and non-cash assets, in this bucket. And then after my wife and I pass on, the second one of us passes on, then that trust lives on. And guess what? It does not have to go through probate. It does not have to go, and it's a private matter. A will is always public. It's a public document. It'll be filed at the courthouse. A trust is not. I'm getting too technical. The point is, there are great avenues, because here's the bottom line. There are 3 groups of people who will own everything that you own one day. Should the Lord tarry, because we know how the whole thing wraps up. But until then, if we go home, there are 3 groups of people who will have those golf clubs, those clothes, that car, the stuff you want, the stuff you don't want. Everybody's getting, all of it. The question is who? Well, there's 3 groups of people. You ready? Your beneficiaries. So your children or other people that, mean a lot to you. Charitable causes. We always recommend your church, leave money to your church through you give here, we'll give here too. One way to think of it is if you have, I got 3 kids, we'll have a 4th kid named Charity, okay? And give money to charity in your will, all right? So there's your beneficiaries, charitable causes, and the IRS. And the decisions you make today will determine how much each one of those groups of people get. And like Ron Blue says, I like to do my giving while I'm living, so I'm knowing where it's going. Make these decisions now so you'll know where it's going. All right, that's just a little sidetrack on estate planning because it's so important part of our financial picture. All right, and then the last piece of this, we had be generous, save, and then we got to look at spending. That's never the funnest part of this conversation, because now we're going to talk about, do you really need, that $5 Starbucks, cup of coffee, or, those sorts of things. And this is if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, this is where he's really going to press in and tell you to put your credit cards in a block of ice in the freezer, so you got to melt it before you can use it, those kinds of things. Whatever it takes, okay? I'm a fan of whatever it takes. But let's just unpack this a little bit. I've already said this, money makes a terrible master. There's my friend again. A little notice is back. All right, let's talk about a budget for a second. Now, you may be an app person who would, most of your life in your financial world kind of runs through this little thing. There are great apps out there. The most common ones I researched are Good Money. I like this one, YNAB, which is Y-N-A-B. You need a budget. That's funny. Good Budget, YNAB, and Rocket Money are the top 3 budgeting apps. I'm married to another person who has a finance degree, and she is an expert in Excel. And so guess how our monthly budget is done? On Excel. That's just how, my wife Camille dreams in Excel spreadsheets. Okay, that's just her. You can tell her I said so because it's true. She will tell you what dreams that she's had about Excel spreadsheets, but that's her. Lots of counseling. No, so pray for me. No, I don't sum up all the time, really, right? So anyhow, whatever works for you. A paper budget, whatever it takes you, but have some model of thinking about your spending and your income. That's all a budget is some model to think about your spending and your income. So with that in mind, let's kind of talk about the role of a budget as we kind of track our spending and our income. And this is kind of a talk that I've heard and given for years about budgets. And so, because sometimes it's like a bad word for some people, budget, or like in a church, and we got to talk about the budget now. It's almost like a 4-letter word in the church, But a budget it's a guess. It's, so, well, we think we're going to have this much money come in, and we think we're going to need this much money to spend. And so you're forecasting the future, and so you're putting some sort of guess in place. So the point is it's not an exact science. It's a guess, but it's an educated guess. It's a good guess. It's one that you think is going to be accurate. A budget is a goal. So a budget is a guess, but it's also a goal. You say, well, hey, our spending was here this year, but you know what? If we really tried hard, I think we could get it down to here, and that way it would give us more money to save or invest or be generous, in another way. And so it's a goal. It's a way to kind of put some vision. And again, the budget isn't the end all. The vision, the goal, where you're headed with your life is the big picture. This is just a tool to help you get there. Okay, that's all this is. So, and then lastly, or almost lastly, it's a guide. So during the year, you're able to go, oh, we spent way more money eating out and going to movies in the last 3 months. We need to cut that back a little bit, and maybe we need to do this. And so it just gives you a chance to track, and again, do what? Make course corrections so you can finally hit your goal. So it's a guide that helps you get to where you're going to go. But here's the thing. It's not a God. A budget is not the, people of faith especially, we believe that God has the ability and the complete right to interrupt our lives and take us in new ventures all the time. But don't use that as an excuse for not planning and having a good financial plan. So it's a goal, it's a guess, it's a guide, but it's not a little g God. And here's what I mean, and not this church, but other churches that aren't as spiritual as this church. It's like the law of the Medes, that like, Pastor Jeff, you spent $14 over on the coffee budget this month. It's not a God. Okay, it serves us in our purpose, not the other way around. So use it that way. So don't make it a bad word. Make it a tool that's helpful. And hey, just keep this in mind when you're thinking about spending, because we're talking about spending appropriately. If your household income is $25,000 or more, you're in the top 2% of people on the planet walking Earth today. So in the grand, you may say, well, Rick, I don't have this and I don't have that. Okay. And there's real needs in our community and in people, even in the life of a church. There's real needs. And so I'm not saying that poverty doesn't touch us. It does. But if your income is $25,000, you generally are going to be able to eat, okay? And have your basic things taken care of. That's not hardly a living. That's below the poverty line. I realize that. But you are in the top 2% of the world. So just know there's a lot of other people walking planet Earth today doing worse off than us. And so just kind of perspective. Keep things in perspective is what we're saying. And then I just had to throw this in there. Used cars are awesome. The average car payment of a new is $716. That's the July number. Excuse me, that's the June number. I just pulled that yesterday. New people rolling new cars off the lot, on average, are rolling that car off with a $716. That used to be like a mortgage payment. Now it's a car payment. Literally, that's the national average. Got 2 cars in the driveway. They both got loans on them. We're backing up. So, used cars are awesome. Never, ever buy a new car. Okay, I don't know if I think I'll say it again. Ever, right? Just don't buy it. Just don't do it. Okay? Sorry if you're a car salesman. Sorry. Hopefully you're a used car salesman. But it used to be the case, I don't know if this stat is still true, but when you drive a new car off the lot within 3 months, you've lost 45% of the value of that car. Now, there are the car market's been wonky lately, so there have been some used cars that have actually gone up in value. But that's because we have a weird economic situation going on. That is not it is a depreciating asset. Okay, it will not be worth in 2 or 3 years unless you bought a classic car and spent $50,000 on it and you're fixing it up. But if you bought, a 2019 Honda, or if you bought a 2023 Honda, it's going to be worth less in 2 or 3 years than what it's worth today, on average, in typical. All right, so just stay away from that. Be careful. So here's the whole, if you say, Rick, what's your whole deal in a sentence? What's everything I need to walk out of here with? Give generously, save regularly, and spend appropriately. in that order, by the way. Give first. Don't just give. Well, if I have some money left over, I'll get it. Make that first, because again, that's going to set the tone for how you relate to money. Secondly, save regularly. Have a savings plan. Do it regularly, and then spend appropriately. That's what will get you there. I'm going to do this in about 2 minutes, because some of us have, and all of us to some degree, if you're part of a church, or you're part of a nonprofit, or you're part of Christmas Dreams, or you're part of some kind of a organization that has financial controls. I just want to speak a little bit about that, because we're all part of those organizations, and some of us serve in leadership. So here's some real quick and dirty things that I would say every for-profit and nonprofit organization needs to think about. Have a real budget organizationally, if you're a church, if you're a nonprofit. And I say that because I walked into an organization that Bob now leads, and he's doing it a lot better than I did it, and a lot better than how it was done before I got there. And I'll just say that because of this. I walked in and they had a budget, but the budget had never been, that amount of money on the budget had not been taken in probably 10 years. And yet when I walked in and I said, can I see your budget? They gave me this document and it said, this is how much we plan to take in. And I said, is this what you're taking in? And said, oh no. They were actually having to lay people off and have people come in and work less hours because they couldn't cover their spending. And yet they had this budget amount that was higher than any amount that had been given in many years. And it was kind of like a fantasy. What it was is they just didn't have the will to reduce the budget as the giving went down. And so they just kind of kept it there and just kind of was hoping that it would come back one day. And, well, that's a good thing to maybe, like I said, it's a goal, but it's got to be real. And so make sure your budget is right-sized. It's not a fantasy. Okay, it's a real budget. So particularly when it comes to handling other people's money. Like if you want to have a goal for your personal budget to make $1 million next year, go for it. But you better have a plan to get there. But don't do that to an organization that you're giving leadership to. That's not good stewardship. Have a real board of directors, whatever that looks like, or trustees if it's a church or a nonprofit. And what I mean is like people who will ask hard questions and will push back. If you don't have anybody, if you're a staff member or an executive, director of an organization, and you don't have anybody that would question things or push back and go, yeah, but what about this? You're probably not getting the benefit of that contra thinking, okay? And it's really good to have diverse opinions and viewpoints. I've got a 15-person board on the organization where I serve. They meet regularly and they're very kind and supportive, but they will absolutely ask hard questions. And when we make a loan decision or we make a decision about a change in our investments, they absolutely will ask questions and give input and guidance. And we need that and we want that, and you'll have a better outcome if you have that. So I say that just because I work with a lot of nonprofits that don't have that kind of deliberation at the executive level, and they really need it. And then you'll be better for it. You'll be healthier, and it'll probably keep you out of jail, which is good. And I'm half kidding when I say that. Publish regular financial reports, also good to do. Preferably, audits can be expensive. Reviews can be expensive, but try to do what you can to have an outside reviewer or somebody outside your organization. There's actual data that says giving to an organization, a nonprofit, goes up when people know that they are audited or their books are being looked at by somebody outside the organization. So it's really helpful and actually helps your finances go up because people are going to trust you more and they're going to but be transparent in your finances is the principle there. And then this is just internal stuff. I stopped counting the number of embezzlement or fraud cases that I'm aware of in the state of Florida just among churches. And not that it happens all the time, but it happens enough that it's so preventable because if they would just do this. In other words, the same person that opens the checks is not the one that's balancing the checkbook, okay? And so there needs to be a separation of duties. And if you have check signing authorities and those kinds of things, make it two. You always have dual control and have separation of duties. If you just do those two things, 80% of issues would be solved in nonprofit financial management. Dual control, separation of duties. And then, again, I'm going to run through this real quick. This is a new thing, but there's been a lot of crackdown on this. Make sure you're keeping your documents, whether they be digital or physical, hard copies, for at least 5 to 7 years. And you probably should have a policy. I know I'm getting way down in the weeds now, but people, accountants, and others who kind of look outside organizations, they want to know that you're hanging on to your records. You're not just discarding them after a year. And also your board meeting or how you govern your organization, you want to keep those minutes and those documents for a number of years as well. And so have policies about that. It could be as simple as we think we should do this and then practice that. I know that's a little bit, off there, but all right, last thing. I think how we doing? Yeah, we're pretty good on time. I'll stop after this and we'll have a little bit of Q&A and then we'll land it. I found this and it kind of reminded me of the whole idea of making sure that we're operating our finances not from a sense of I just need to get through the end of the week. Yes, that's true. We do. You don't want to spend your, the whole thing. If you got more week than you got money, you do want to manage so that you can cover your expenses and all that. But posture your attitude and your practice towards financial resources in direct relationship to your purpose and your calling, and make sure you know the difference. And so I found this video. It's got Michael Jr. He's an actor. He's a comedian. And he kind of tells us the difference between the what we do and why we do it. So I thought this might be a good place to end.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director?
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
rich. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
All right, did you get that last sentence? When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking in and toward your purpose. And I really thought that'd be a good place to land, talk about money, because we often think about money as what we have. And yet, what if all of this financial resource is not about what, but it's about why? That there's an actual purpose, there's an outcome, there's an intention, there's a goal, there's a direction to all of this, and it's simply a tool to help us do the why. So that's my prayer for all of us, that we will have not just financially thrive just because it's good to have more, but it's good to be able to walk in and toward your purpose. And sometimes financial resources can help us do that and empower others to do that as we live openly and generously with money. All right, so just a couple of resources if you want to come up here and take a look at them, to refer some things. Let me start out with the personal side. Chkg, founder of Chick-fil-A, wrote a great book on wealth called Wealth, Is It Worth It? And if you know anything about Chick-fil-A organization, they've mastered not getting trapped in just the money trap. And so how to live generously. Dave Ramsey, you're probably familiar with, a very famous author and practitioner in the area of stewardship. The Legacy Journey, A Radical View of Biblical Wealth and Generosity. So that's a good one I would recommend to you. Plastic Donuts by Jeff Anderson. It's a great book that challenges you to be radically generous and just delight in generosity. And not get caught up. The Money Challenge, a lot of what I shared today was from Art Rainer's Money Challenge book. Probably one of when I'm asked, and this was actually the Money Challenge for teens. He did a book for teenagers to kind of take it to their level. But when I'm asked to come into a church and talk about stewardship, this is usually, and I've actually taught this in a 6-week format in our church, in my home church. And then on the corporate side, whether you're in church leadership or nonprofit leadership, or for-profit leadership. There's a local CPA firm here in Orlando. I think they're one of the best in the country. It's Batts Morrison. Mike Batts has written a couple of books, Nonprofit Financial Oversight, all the stuff I was talking about with governance and boards and budgets and all that, the financial transparency. And then there's a book that we often recommend to churches called a Church Financial Guidebook. It gets a lot into the how to handle the dual control and the financial practices and operational excellence that you want, all that sort of thing. So I'll put these down here if you want to come take a look at them. How are we doing on time? We're okay? Yeah, we're all right. Got a little extra time. Any questions or things we want to chat about?
My husband and I have wills, and recently in a conversation with our attorneys, it came up, and I said, well, I hear all this stuff about trusts,
Yeah.
and I don't understand them. I don't know if we benefit from them.
Yeah.
And her opinion was people were getting away from trusts, and that this is what they're not a personal injury attorney firm or anything, a small one here in Oviedo. And she said that they've been having trouble with them and one thing and another, so now I'm completely confused because I know nothing.
People use revocable trusts like they use savings accounts. I mean, they're just as common and very effective. And so now, here's what I would say about attorneys and trusts, and realizing this is being recorded. But every attorney, once you pass the bar exam, you're an attorney. Okay, whether you're doing personal injury or trial practice or whatever. Every attorney because they passed law school, they should know how to set up a trust for a family, okay? But that doesn't mean that every attorney is equally knowledgeable about the best way to do it, because sometimes families can be complex. And you have children that sometimes are estranged, or you have grandchildren, and you have mixed families, and you have a lot of things going on. So here's what I would say. Work with an attorney whose specialty is estate planning. So not every attorney is as deeply knowledgeable about estate planning as every other attorney. So if you're dealing with an attorney that specializes in sometimes elder care or estate planning is what they'll call it, that's who I would recommend. And I do have some specific ones I can recommend, but Every attorney I know that's doing estate work employs a revocable trust as a.
Yeah, they do lots of different kinds of law.
Mhm.
And they set up our wills 10 years
Sure.
ago, but
And again, any attorney can do that. They're completely proficient at doing that. But a revocable trust is a little bit more of a complex document because it's an entity that lives on after you, after you're gone.
I see a lot of it. We had a construction company, I had to get permits.
Yeah.
And when you go to get a permit on a home, you would see.
Yeah. If you're a small business owner, I can almost guarantee you, I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving legal advice, but I'm giving legal education. It's very common practice to have a family trust set up. If you're going to pass, unless you're going to cash out of the business and sell it and not have that. But if that business is going to survive you to your next generation, it's very common to do that.
You know, we closed down, we're done.
There you go.
But I mean, I would see this a lot on the property appraiser site when you look.
Oh, yes.
For the information, and
Right.
it got me thinking, and I didn't know where to go to find
Yep.
out.
Estate attorneys are really good for that.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, hey, let me dismiss us in a brief word of prayer. We'll move on to the day, and I think Jeff has a closing session for us. Hey, Lord, thank you for this time, and thank you for these people and the opportunity just to kind of reflect on every good and perfect gift that you put into our hands. May we steward it well. May we be wise. And we just pray that today would be beneficial in making us more purposeful and walking in our purpose as we were just hearing. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thank you.
Now, are you local, Rick?